sweaty, by the way. We are live. Welcome to Shooting the Shit. It's Monday. I was just explaining. Yes, I've literally just run in from doing the horses, and although it's raining, it is boiling, so I'm very sweaty. So there we go. Nice image. Welcome to another Shooting the Shit. We are here today to talk about breastfeeding in the workplace. So something some people have done, something some people have never done. And obviously people come at this from all sorts of different angles. And we were just saying before we came live, it can be a really, really emotive subject. Breastfeeding in itself can be a really emotive subject and can lead to some really surprising feelings that people perhaps don't even expect themselves to feel. So we just want to say at the outset that we are making no judgments whatsoever on anybody. So if you choose to breastfeed, that's great. If you choose not to, that's also great. You do what's you. But we are here today to talk about how we can make breastfeeding more open for women, more of an option for women if they do want to go back to work and continue doing it. So first things first, introduction. Samara, what's your name and where'd you come from?
So I'm Samara and I'm in lovely Haslingden, which is again absolutely chucking it down today, but boiling hot.
Yeah, it's so hot, isn't it? It's ridiculous. Yeah. It's so sticky. And Reesh, what's your name? Where'd you come from?
I'm Marisha. I'm in Costerdale, South Yorkshire. It is equally unpleasant, but I've not been outside, so I can't really comment on how sweaty it is.
Right. Okay, you're not sweating in your bed though.
No, I've been trying to get out all day, but the calls come in, so best laid plans and all that. So here we are.
I sat down this morning with so many things on my to-do list to get through, and I've got through none of them.
Not a single one has been done. Yeah.
One of those days, one of those Mondays. My name's Rachel. I'm in Bacup from Go Traffic. Hannah will also be joining us, hopefully shortly. She's just doing something with school, so some sort of job that she had to finish off. So first thing I want to talk about then, as I said before, this can be a really emotive subject for people. It really comes down to sort of personal choice. So I just want to sort of say, Samara, you've been I keep calling you a breastfeeding advocate, but apparently you're a breastfeeder peer-to-peer support, aren't you? So just give me a little bit of information about that job role and kind of how you've experienced it over the few years you've been doing it.
Yes, so I didn't know very much about breastfeeding when I had my second daughter, except for the fact that I'd not managed to do it with my first very well, and really, really struggled. So it was... I'm a really stubborn person, so I decided when I had my second daughter that I wasn't going to pay any money for any formula and I was going to do my best to breastfeed. And we were really lucky that it worked for us. And I really understand and appreciate that it doesn't work for everybody and it's not everyone's choice. But it just worked for us so well. And I decided to go on some training to be like a peer supporter. And what that is, and the way that I look at that is that it's certainly not telling people what to do. It's around giving people information so they can make informed choices. But I'm really particularly keen on not shaming, not putting guilt on people, and just really helping people come to their own decisions for what's best for them, the baby and the family.
It is interesting, like you say. I had Leon. He's nearly 13, so it was quite a long time ago. But I didn't breastfeed, but when I went back to work, but I actually weaned him because I was going back to work, because I didn't think it would be practical, or never even occurred to me that there would be options to carry that on. So he was 6 months old when I went back to work. So I had, a combination fed. So I had managed to do it up until that point, but I potentially would have carried on a bit longer had I not been returning to work. And it's funny, like you say, sometimes it's just about not knowing what your options are at all, is it? We don't, as women, do we know what our options are?
No, that's it. I mean, I breastfed Indy. That's something on my computer going off. I breastfed her until she was 19 months old. And I'm laughing because she's nearly 5 now. And I think if she thought that she doesn't really understand what that is, except for when she's doing it with the dolls, and to think that I was doing it for that long surprises me.
Yeah.
But I was really keen to make it work at work. But I was really nervous more so about how it would work with her going to nursery, not the work side of things. I didn't know how that balance would work. And it was only when I started working away that we weaned, and she came off completely because I'd be away for a night or two, and then it just stopped.
So how did you manage it when you were at work then? What did you do?
So I was really lucky in some respects with the sort of place that I worked at. I worked at a national charity, and they had policies in place to make sure that it happened. But I really recognised that not everybody has that. And I was the manager as well of the service that I was at, so it was easy for me to set those boundaries and put those things in place to make it happen. Whereas again, that people don't always have those options. I was working in a building that had lots of rooms, so I could find a room to go and I chose to express. I chose to pump and either bag it up and take it home or just get rid of it. But that I know, again, that's not always the case. People don't always have that luxury. I've heard so many stories of people just being shown into basically like a cupboard or told to go into the toilets and things like that. So, I know I was really lucky, but I know that that's not what happens for everybody. My one tip would be, if you wanted to do it, is to look at your work policies if you work in a big organisation beforehand. So you can go in prepared to have those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And just, Rish, what's your breastfeeding story, just in case people wonder why I'm not asking you what you did when you went back to work?
I don't have any children, so therefore, and I haven't been through a breastfeeding journey in any way. But I'm interested because as a potential employer, it's something to consider. Moving into, I dabble in all sorts of businesses, as I think most people know. One of which, touches on the HR space now. And so, there's lots of things that are changing, lots of expectations in the workplace these days, but I also, my that whole shame, that whole kind of, that whole conversation around breastfeeding, whilst it doesn't affect me personally, I'm massively empathetic towards it, because even, just the wording and the terminology around it is so emotive, like from day one, even I'm like, fuck, like how do you deal with that if it's a problem? Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm going off on a tangent a little bit, but there's lots of wording around it that immediately makes me think, yeah, but what if you can't, or what if it's a problem, or how do you get around that? Because immediately you feel as though you've done something wrong, and also have to justify that to people as well. Do you know what I mean? So yes, it obviously then carries through into the workplace as such too.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right, because again, it comes back to that thing of, if you are feeling anxious about it and like you've got to justify it, and I mean, even like the medical, the official guidance on it has changed so much, even just in my lifetime. When I was born, bottle was still best, and then all of a sudden breast is best, and you're not allowed to come, and then it's 3 months, and then it's 6 months, and so women are excused, I think, for feeling confused about it. So you're already feeling uncertain, then whichever option you choose seems to be wrong, and somebody's got an opinion about it and is shaming you, and then you've got to go and stand up in front of your employer and justify, make your case and justify what you want to do, and that must just add all of those layers of stress and worry, mustn't it? Have you ever been in a workplace, Rish, where people have breastfed, or where they've allowed it, or anything like that?
No, I've been in typically male-dominated environments, full stop, or people that have not had children, and it's never been a thing, quite frankly. But like I say, it actually came up in a conversation last week about processes, procedures, and having documentation in place and policies, and breastfeeding, being one of them. That is, and it started off in a conversation about how the expectation from Gen Z and what they're expecting in the workplace. That's kind of how it came about. But tapped into that too, and having to have a place to be able to go and breastfeed, because then on the flip side, as an employer, if you don't have that, what do you do? Do you know what I mean? If I'm in a building or I have an office that's an open plan and that's it, you know, and I don't have any other kind of ways to kind of manage that, then what do I do as an employer to be able to support that?
Really practically speaking, that's what a lot of offices are now. I was at an office in Manchester just last week, and it was a really lovely modern building, and it's a centre of Manchester, really trendy, but it was a massive open plan office, and even the individual offices were all glass. So there was the only place that was private was the toilet. And there was nowhere to hide. And so absolutely, you think, if you are an employer and you haven't thought about this and put it in place in advance, what are you going to do when somebody comes to you and they've already got a baby and they're about to come back to work and you've suddenly got to find a solution? There are other benefits to employers, though, that do this. So not only the kind of forward planning is advisory for businesses that do it, but, it also helps you retain staff. So if you've got women, good women that are working for you, you've trained them up, they're invested in your company, they know it, obviously you want them to come back to work after they've had a baby. So just by offering it, you're going to retain your staff a lot better. And also, if it's part of a sort of benefits package, for want of a better word, I mean, it should be a basic provision, but they call it part of a benefits package. It helps you attract newer, as you said, Gen Z employers, gets people in, and it can also, it can help with staff morale generally. Again, it's that you are seen as a nice employer, you're caring for your staff, you're providing all those things that really should come as standard. So if you are a business, it's a really good option to think about this. What are the different options that are for women then, do we think, Samara? Where if you've got your baby, 5 months old, you're thinking of going back to work, let's just quickly go through the various different options that women could have and ways they could go back to work.
Yes. So I think legally employers have to offer that option of the time to continue feeding. And I think it was really interesting what you mentioned about Gen Z and how people want the culture at work to be different. People work looks so much different now to what it did even just a couple of years ago. People will only go and work places that they feel is the right culture for them, and they're making those decisions in advance. I think the main thing for me is when people do like the back to work days, and I can't remember what they're called. They've got
they're called. We used to call them keep in touch days in the NHS.
Days. There we go. Yeah. Is to be really, if it's you and your child and your thoughts, is be really honest with your manager when you start having those kit days and say, this is how it needs to look, or how can we make this work when I come back, and see what the options are. I mean, like you said, it might be that the toilet is the only place because of the way that the offices are set up, but you need to decide whether that's going to work for you.
But do you know what? Actually, I mean, I remember when I was breastfeeding, there were a couple of times where I'd gone away. I was away from Leon for a set period, and I'd forgotten to take any kind of breast pump or anything. Well, the first time I didn't even realise what was going to happen. I went away, and then after like a few hours, I was like, "Oh my God, how do I deal with this situation? Nobody told me about this." Yeah. And I literally just ended up squeezing my boobs into a toilet sink. But I mean, I wouldn't have minded. I genuinely wouldn't have minded just sitting on a toilet in a toilet cubicle and expressing or whatever. Even I don't think I would have minded feeding my baby, as long as the toilet was clean. Yeah, that would have been fine. So we're not saying that women are going to come in and demand, plush changing rooms with lovely, free toiletries. It's not necessarily that. It's about having that conversation. And if all you've got is the toilet, then just say, I'll just make sure it's clean, and I'll make sure it's private, and I'll make sure you've got the space you need.
That's it. And what I think is really interesting, it's like another challenge that women face, where it looks like they're asking for something above and beyond. People that there might be these issues in the workplace, like why is she getting something that I'm not getting, that I'm not got, because this person's allowed to go and spend time expressing or having the child brought in so they can feed them and things like that. But they have to happen. Men don't have that. They can't pull the face about it because they're not the ones breastfeeding.
But they haven't just pushed a human out of their bodies, have they? So sure.
But if we have this sort of sense that there are challenges, or there are things that women are going to face in their work life that looks different to in a man's work life journey, then I think the way that we look at things could and should be very different. interestingly, you know, we've talked quite a lot about offices and things like that. A friend of mine is breastfeeding her daughter. She works in a beauty salon. Beauty salon, is that what they're called? Beauticians.
Yeah.
And you know, that again, that's a very different setup again, because it's just, you know, beauty rooms and things like that. And she works in the same town that she lives in, and her boyfriend used to bring baby in to breastfeed and then take her away. But she could do that because she was in a very small company, 3 of them, and they had that conversation. That's what they agreed they did. So, you know, I think it's about being dynamic and about really making it work for the workplace that you're in and the situation you're in.
And I do think that's a really, you know, it's a really good point that you must consider, because we talk about sort of implementing breastfeeding policies in the workplace as though this is a one-size-fits-all solution. And the reason, you know, there is some guidance on the NHS website and the government website, which I will link to in the notes. But the reason that there isn't a sort of strict regulation about what should be provided and how much and how often is because workplaces are also fundamentally different. And some women are working shifts, so they might entirely be able to speak to their employer and shift their shifts around their breastfeeding needs. That might be feasible. Some women now, especially since the pandemic, are working from home. You know, we're a work from home business. I know you mostly are as well, Rish, aren't you? So, you know, it's not, as employers, we don't have that same level of, you know, responsibility to provide, because our employees are in their own home and are free to, you know, feed their babies whenever they want to feed their babies. So it's absolutely about allowing that flexibility. And the other thing to say is that there isn't one solution fits all for women either. You know, some women would be happy to express, some women will want to bring the baby in. You know, it's about finding a bespoke solution, but working with your employer to find it, isn't it?
I think that's it. You know, from my perspective, it's as it always is. It's about the culture and the environment in the workplace in the first place, right? Because, you know, if you can have a conversation, you know, with whatever that looks like for you and looks like for the business, and, you know, like you say, you come to an agreement with how it works for both of you, as opposed to something that's imposed. This is the way that it is, and you get 20 minutes to do what you need to do, and you must be back at your desk. You know, that's just not going to happen, right?
Well, do you know what? Actually, that's a really good point as well, because breastfeeding your baby, you know, some babies do it really quickly and some babies don't. So, you know, I remember situations with Leon where we seemed to be sat on my boob for like literally hours. And, you know, again, this is why there's got to be that flexibility, because some women will be able to just, you know, baby gets dropped off, nip in the toilets, have 20 minutes and they're back at the desk. Whereas for some, that's never going to work. So, you know, it's so uncertain, isn't it?
And there's some jobs that it just won't ever happen, will it? You know, I imagine, I don't know why, but bus drivers came into my mind first of all. But, you know,
I thought of a vet. Imagine being like a farm vet.
I was in a garage.
Yeah, I'm just going to nip in the stable.
And you know what? I have spoke to some mums as well who have found it to be a relief. Like you said, it was almost like the point that people stopped doing it. It was that people knew that they were going to go back to work at 6, 9, 12 months or whatever, and that was their goal, or that was their time, and that fit nicely. So it didn't become something that happened in the workplace, and then their dynamic changed, and it became a different part of their life then. So I think you know, there's that conversation to have as well, I think.
Well, I think that's another good point to raise as well, because it's not just, it's your identity, changes your identity as a woman, as who you are, doesn't it? But, you know, when I'm at work, I am a different person to the person that I am at home. I know I work from home, but, you know, when I'm just being a mum and when I'm running a meeting, those are essentially two different people. And I don't want those to cross over. You know, I've taken Leon to meetings. Of course, I have many times, and I'm still perfectly capable of doing my job. But, you know, it does change how people see you, particularly men. And I do wonder if you're in a particularly, you know, high-powered job or very competitive work environment, if you are suddenly then seen as the woman who's, you know, covered in milk and smells of babies and is off half the time, you know, breastfeeding, that is going to change how people look at you, and there's no point sort of denying that, is there?
For sure, and I think that's another, that's a before you even get to that point, isn't it? Right, it's a consideration for what how you feel, what you want to do with your jobs, your career, your everything. Right, it's a and it's a struggle, because it's almost like saying that you have to even before you get to that point, you have to put all your I've got to do X by the time I'm 20, then I've got to do the next thing by the time I'm 30, and I've got to make sure that, but I've got a child in that point, but that's got to, almost like it's written for you and it's mapped out. And we all know that that's not how life works, right? It just does what it wants, and everything happens, when, as and when, so I think it's, even to have to think about that, it's just, quite frankly, all of this is just an absolute head fuck. Do you know what I mean? As a woman,
isn't it? Like I say,
yeah. Oh my God, I don't even want to have to think about these things. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, but you're right. And men just never have to think about this. And I don't want us to, we're not bashing men in any way, but it's just true that there are all these additional considerations around work. And then, if we do stop breastfeeding, then we feel massively bloody guilty because we've stopped breastfeeding so that we can go back to work. There's just no winning, is there? I just want us to come on to, though, quickly, like some of the, just whilst we're on a doom and gloom, some of the objections that women might face, either from the workplace or from their employers or from colleagues in the workplace. So what are some of the objections that people are that might come their way, do you think? It's not a test.
I don't know.
There's no wrong answer.
Yeah, I struggle with this because I don't know.
I think the main thing is people think that someone's getting something they're not.
Yeah.
Like,
they do it over smoking, don't they? When someone's going for smoking breaks, they're like, why are they getting 5 minutes all the time? Yeah.
I think that's the big one.
Yeah, and then so the other ones as well that people will say is that it's not appropriate for the workplace, I suppose, because even if you are going and doing it in a private space or whatever, whether you're going to have, one thing we've not said is that bosses will need to provide a clean fridge. So if women are expressing, they need to have a fridge where they can store the milk safely and securely till the end of the day. So, if you've got, I don't know, people going in and out of the work kitchen and they're saying, why is our works fridge all of a sudden filled with breast milk? Or why have we got a breast pump in the unisex toilets? Or, some people genuinely don't think it is an appropriate activity to happen in the workplace, do they?
No. Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say that I think I just, part of me, like in this conversation now, is like, no wonder so many women set up their own businesses and just like go off and do what they need to do, because this is just a fucking nightmare. Do you know what I mean? Like having to navigate all of this. You've got enough going on with having the child in the first place, let alone all of this other stuff as well. And, that's my, I don't have any other kind of, feeling on it other than, I'm not surprised, quite frankly, because, it's difficult.
We touched on it before, didn't we? But about how everyone's got their own opinion on it and everyone's had a different experience. One of the other challenges might be if you're in an office with a lot of women who either don't think you should be breastfeeding or didn't have great breastfeeding journeys, didn't have a great experience, and it can really raise all of those thoughts, and it can cause tension. It can cause tension even just within a group of friends, let alone a group of colleagues who possibly don't have that level of care for each other.
Because also you don't know everybody's journey. There might be women that you're working with who are not able to conceive and are going through a really stressful time trying to conceive, and then you're there with your baby and they might feel like you're rubbing their faces in it. So there's jealousy, there's guilt, there's resentment, there might be feelings even of well why I should be doing her job now because she's spending half her time in the loos and I'm having to pick up the work that she's missing, and I should be getting paid for doing that. So and every single one of those emotions are valid. You can see where they will come from. So it's absolutely terrifying, actually, isn't it? Completely terrifying. Hi, Indy.
Someone for a little cuddle.
Oh, that's all right. She's like, have you started school now, Indy? Are you at big school?
Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, so I do think, you know, it's an absolute minefield, and you can understand why, if you're an employer and you are trying to, you know, make sure you are enabling the woman who wants to come back to work and breastfeed, but you're also then going to have to deal with all of these other emotions from the rest of your staff. You can understand why employers might be reluctant to do it, besides the fact of, you know, rooms and fridges and equipment and space and time and all the rest of it. So yeah, you're right, Reach. I can absolutely see why a lot of women leave. And in fact, it's been proven sort of statistically, hasn't it, that having children is a time when a lot of women leave the workplace. Some obviously don't work, some will go part-time, and some will set up their own businesses. So it's a massive period of change for women.
I think as well, you know, I think there's, especially for a smaller business that maybe hasn't considered a lot of this stuff because you know they've got the people that they need, you know, to do the jobs that they need to, because they're a small business, right? I think it's very different when you're in a corporate environment, quite frankly. You know, I would say that, you know, it's maybe one for not having to feel like you have to deal with it on your own. You know, there are HR professionals that can help you in that space. There are things that you can do to bring in external support that is not necessarily at a cost to the business, you know, to try and navigate some of this stuff, you know, because, you know, we're coming at this from a female perspective. You know, imagine the male bosses having to deal with this too, right? It's like they're just like mind blown, you know. So I think that's the only thing that I would add into it, that, you know, there's a lot of skills out there and a lot of people that can help in this place if it's not something that you're familiar with doing.
So Samara, I know your sort of role wasn't, you were more peer support, not supporting the workplace and stuff. But if an employer did want to speak to somebody or try and get some support, or a woman wanted to find support, where might they go to find that?
I can put a load of links of different places on here afterwards. There's the breastfeeding network, but even things like ACAS and things like that, or your own union, if you are in an organisation that has union representation. I think the really important thing is just to have those conversations, though, and the chances are, if you're a bit worried about bringing it up, so is your employer. They will be worried about getting it right too. And I would imagine that there'd be more bosses who want to get it right and who care and who want to do that work, as opposed to ones that really can't be asked and, you know, aren't bothered. I think the world of work is changing significantly, isn't it? And people know that they have to have that open culture. But on the flip side, there are some jobs and some professions and some offices that it's just not going to, not that it won't work for, it will just be significantly more difficult.
Yeah, and I think the key there is just having those open conversations, isn't it? So, you know, from either side, don't go in making demands and saying, you know, you are legally required to supply me with this or whatever. You know, just go in with an open mind and a sort of gentle approach, if you like, not apologetic, but, you know, gentle, saying, I would like to breastfeed when I come back to work, or I would like to express when I come back to work. You know, how are we going to make it work rather than just a list of demands?
Yeah, I agree. I think that's key, right? How do we make it work? That's the thing, as opposed to how do you fix it for me to make sure I can do what I need to do, that really aggressive kind of way, right? Yeah, it's perfect.
Because
lovely plans today. We solved all the problems in one hot elbow.
There we go. All sorted. And I think the key thing, you know, if we are sort of, one of the reasons why we've been doing these podcasts, quite often we'll sort of say, you know, if you are an employer, here are 5 things that you can do, or here are the steps that you need to take, or whatever. And again, I just want to come back to the reason that this session hasn't been these are the things that you need to put in place, is very much because this is a bespoke position from the employer and from the woman. You know, everybody is going to need a very, very unique solution to this to enable them to do it. And what will work for one woman absolutely will not work for somebody else. So it's really got to be led by the workplace and the employer working together. Otherwise, it's just not going to work. So there we go. Solve breastfeeding in the workplace. Samara, final point that you would like to make to either women or to employers?
I think you summed it up really well there. I think it's about having conversations as early as possible, so there's no surprises on either behalf. But also considering what support you've got at home as well. You know, you might need someone who can whiz your baby up to work because you can't express. So it's just about the support and having those conversations as soon as possible.
Yeah, excellent. Rish, final thought.
I don't have any today. I've excelled myself, so that's it.
You have indeed. And mine would just be that, you know, I think that the key thing we've said about flexibility of approach, but one of the key things I think people need to bear in mind is that even once you've set a plan in place, you still then need to be flexible, because that's going to change. You know, we're breastfeeding 3 times a day one week, you might need to do it 4 times a day the next, or you might quickly decide, actually, this isn't working for me. I'm going to wean the baby. So, you know, you need to be completely flexible throughout the whole thing and just keep talking, keep those lines of communication open. That's it. Brilliant. Thank you very much to both of you. Really appreciate that. If you are watching this live or you're watching it on catch up, please do leave a comment or ask a question, because we will keep watching it and we will answer it. And if you are listening to this as a podcast, I apologize for the bit in the middle where we all waved at a child that wandered on screen, because if you were just listening to that, you will have no idea what happened. But, you know, please rate and subscribe and like and leave us a comment. We will put some links in the comments